Welcome to Africa in Focus on Afrique Today TV. I'm your host, Samuel Omwenga, and we're happy that you're watching. Africa in Focus is a show that is designed to bring you news, information, and analysis concerning Africa in a manner that is conscious, accurate, and time-conscious, because we know most, if not all of you, do not have enough time to watch news about your respective countries and from Africa as a whole for that matter. We have designed this show such that we can bring you news that you can find useful, and a big part of the show is going to be reinvigorating Pan-Africanism, to reinvigorate in a manner such that more people who don't know about it, or at least people who don't know about it, can find out what it is and what it can do, what the spirit can do in developing Africa. The way we have designed the show is to select a few countries during the week that we can see what's happening there and bring it to you in a summary form, and also give you commentary about it or analysis that can help you in understanding the events and affairs that are taking place there. In some of the cases we may cover your own country, in some cases we may not, but the way we have selected the shows or the countries to cover is to bring cover issues that are relevant and pertinent for all countries in Africa, such that anytime you're taken to watch it, even if it's not about your country, you can still find some useful information from the show. So come along as we take a tour and put Africa on focus. Welcome back. You're watching Africa in Focus on Afrique Today TV. I'm Samuel Omwenga. A big story that continues to be a big story in Africa and the rest of the world is coronavirus disease, which is threatening to impact globally almost everywhere in the world, and every government everywhere and people everywhere are pretty much putting a lot of emphasis to what to do about this disease. While the number of confirmed cases is still low, there is still a widespread concern, and a lot of it, quite frankly, is being brought about by misinformation or lack of information as to what it is, what the risk factor is, how it can be prevented, and what people need to do. Because of a vacuum of that information in most parts of the world, there is people either with good intentions or sometimes malicious intentions, deliberate intentions, disseminating false information. For example, in Nigeria, one of the newspapers there covered a story or a news item saying that men should shave their beards to avoid contracting the virus, which is absolutely false. As in Nigeria, people in Singapore, Brazil, Pakistan, Ireland, and other countries say that they have seen a flood of this misinformation, especially in social media, WhatsApp specifically, where people are talking about different things which are not true, very much outright lies, or at least misleading. And this is also causing, the message and voices are causing a lot of concern, creating fear, creating fear and confusion in the business world, especially people who are even stopping from patronizing businesses for fear of contracting the disease, which is also not the case. In Kenya, for example, they also had somebody who posted something in WhatsApp that started spreading about a government memo, a government press release, which was giving instructions which were false, what needs to be done. The government in that case had to come forth and put a very strong statement dismissing that press release as fake. And this is a problem. When you see fake things, if people are not trained to know what is fake and what can be fake, they can digest that information and take it to be true or coming from the government, but in this case it was not. The messages and voice memos have instilled fear, troubled businesses, and created public health headaches for governments, as I've said, including Kenya and others. Question is, what should you do? How do you know what information is accurate, what information is true, and which information is false? Now, that is a wrong question to ask. It's a good question to ask, but it's a wrong question to ask, because what you really should be focusing on, what can you do to protect yourself and your families and people around you from contracting the disease? So rather than worrying much about what the information is or what is, well, it's important to know in general what this is, but I think it's important to focus on what steps to take from catching this very dangerous disease. Some of the recommended actions you can take, and this is coming from Center for Disease Control in the United States, and other countries have the same policy or same guidelines, is avoid contact with anyone who has a fever or a cough. Use tissue for coughs and sneezes, and properly dispose of those tissues to a trash bin or other disposable methods. Avoid touching your eyes, nose, and mouth. We know this can be challenging for people who have a habit of doing so, but it is very strongly recommended to completely avoid touching your face altogether. Clean and disinfect frequently frequently touched objects and surfaces. Stay home when you are sick, except when you need to go to the hospital. Now, speaking at the whole point about this, it's important to be informed. An informed and mobilized public is the first defense against the spread of this virus. Speaking at the World Health Organization coronavirus update in Geneva, one of the officials, Dr. Maria van Kerkhove, said one of the things that impressed her when she visited China was how every person in that country knew what to do, what their role was to protect themselves, their families, and people around them, and what to do to collectively deal with this issue. And that was very critical, according to Dr. Kerkhove. That is what we should all do, even as the governments do their part, to make sure proper screening is done and quick diagnosis is made to isolate those suspected of having the virus before they infect others and create the feared pandemic. It is not a pandemic yet, but the misinformation and disinformation that is out there is what threatens to become a pandemic, because people who are afraid of the unknown may start taking actions or inactions for fear of the worst when the worst is not really there. And that is the whole point of this, is to make sure that people are informed. Again, it starts from you as an individual doing what is been recommended to protect yourself from catching this virus. And if you take those steps which we have outlined, which you can also find elsewhere covered online and other sources, that should be good enough for you to be comfortable, to go around your business, to go around doing what you need to do on your daily basis without great fear and anxiety about the virus, which is a serious virus. But again, it doesn't have to completely disrupt lives as it's already starting to do. In fact, it's done in so many other countries. I'll have more to say about this at the end of the show if there's more time. But for now, let's take a break and come back to talk about another news item from Africa. Welcome back. You're watching Africa in Focus on Afrique Today TV. I'm your host, Samuel Omwenga. If you're watching this show on YouTube, I will encourage you to look down there and press on the button like and subscribe to the show. Also share with your family and friends if you have not done so previously. Our next story comes from Cote d'Ivoire, where that country's president, Alhassan Quattara, announced this week he will not seek a third term as previously promised he would, previously promised that he would. The 78-year-old president told lawmakers Thursday in the capital, Yamoussoukro, he has decided to hand over to the next generation, which is a big deal. Most of these African presidents, they don't do that. This was a welcome relief for many, especially those in the opposition, who are afraid that if he were to insist on vying for the third time, the country would have likely plunged into yet another civil unrest, more violence, and even worse. The president, no doubt, had this in mind and must be commended for making the wise decision to leave office when his term expires. This is not only welcome news for Cote d'Ivoire, it's good news reverberating across Africa, which was in the past notorious for having presidents clinging to power till death did them apart. In more recent times, however, we have seen a trending away from this backwardness, though the problem persists in some countries where presidents whose terms have ended or they are barred from running again, they still manage to do so, meaning finding ways to still continue serving in office after their terms have expired or they are barred by their respective constitution from vying again. Qatar, therefore, not seeking a third term is in keeping with this trend, meaning this trend where former presidents are no longer, or sitting presidents whose terms have expired are not seeking to remain in office forever. But that is a trend which must be encouraged, and that's why this is important, great news from Africa. Now, it's going to be for the better of the country, or the continent, if presidents can do this, because along with that comes less strife, less stalemate, and no more civil uprisings, violence, and deaths, which usually follow these presidents who want to prolong their stay in office. Quattara will also leave office in high note because under his leadership, Cote d'Ivoire has routinely recorded some of the highest economic growth in Africa on the back of record cocoa production and investments in infrastructure and other projects. But the country is still suffering from historical divisions based on ethnicity, land, and religion in some parts of the country, which Quattara has been trying to address, but not completely or successfully. However, since he's not seeking his third term, the elections are going to be held in October of this year. The expectation is a new president will have new opportunities to address these problems, hopefully find lasting solution to all of them. Notwithstanding these lingering challenges, however, Quattara gets credit for both economic success in the country and doubly so for deciding to not seek a third term. Quattara joins a good company of presidents who retired from office and went on to enjoy life pursuits in other interests that they find equally interesting, if not more rewarding. Control room, if we can skip that and go to the next video, please. Let's take a short break and return to find out who are these presidents and what they're doing currently. Welcome back. You're watching African Focus on Afrique Today TV. This is Samuel Omwenga, and we're happy that you're watching. As I mentioned earlier, for a long time, African presidents whose terms have expired or they can no longer run for additional time in office because of changes in their constitutions, they still find ways to continue serving in power. Now, owing to international pressure and more organized local opposition, there has been a trend in recent years where these leaders are forced to leave office and not to cling to power until death does them apart, has always been the case, and this is encouraging. Many of these ex-presidents now live different lives, which are quite satisfying to them according to all accounts. Well, there are always exceptions, and those are the ones who either they were forced out unceremoniously and they want to come back again to power, but those are fewer exceptions. More of them actually are out still enjoying life and basically moved on from politics, quite a number of them. The list is long. I think by the last count I did, we did our research and found there are about at least 10 of these presidents, ex-presidents in the continent. Because of time, I'm only going to cover a few of them here. First one here is former President Olusegun Obasanjo of Nigeria, who served as military head of state from 1976 to 1979, and later as president from 1999 to 2007. Obasanjo has done a lot since leaving office and is still very active in Nigerian politics, but that did not stop him from becoming a PhD. He actually continued his education after leaving office, did his master's, and now most recently he had his PhD in theology, which is very impressive for somebody's age. He's also very active in providing guidance and counsel to many African presidents, both publicly and privately, including the current President Buhari of Nigeria, who he's written quite a number of missives. But what we know is that, well, putting ourselves in the president's situation, he might not be caring much about those memos. But the advice he's giving is useful information that basically is given on a take it or leave it proposition. Another president who is in a similar situation that has retired and is still continuing to be interested in doing things in politics is the former President Jose Eduardo dos Santos of Angola, who ruled that country for 38 years before relinquishing power to his successor, current President Lorenzo, and is now seeing, meaning Mr. Santos is seeing his empire he built over the 38 plus years he was amassing wealth at the expense of that country. He is seeing that wealth start disseminating and being attacked, and government itself is trying to get some, if not most of the money back from him and his family. So he's fighting on one end to keep that empire going, but on the other hand, he's also making sure that it remains relevant, as we know, relevant in the country. He was the second longest serving president in Africa, surpassed only by President Teodoro Obiang Nguema of Equatorial Guinea, who took power less than 2 months before Dos Santos did. And that Equatorial president, Mbasogo, is still in office all these years. Who knows how long he's going to be there, except for God. But that is the message, that is the point we're trying to make, that this president should not really be clinging to power this long as they have. And the expectation is that he will join these other presidents who have decided to call it quits, mostly from pressure from outside the country, both within and outside the country. Although Dos Santos, quote-unquote, retired in 2018, he is still a powerful leader in the party that he formed, and he was an instrumental part of, but basically this was his party from the very beginning, that is the People's Movement for the Liberation of Angola, MPLA. People of a certain age would know when you mention MPLA, this was in the 60s and 70s and all those years when all these African countries were getting independence. Those were very nationalistic and very deeply loved and admired parties. Up to this day, they still remain very relevant. Why this is important is because even though Dos Santos is out of office as president, he remains the leader of that MPLA party, which most people believe. In fact, you'll be hard put to find anybody who doesn't agree that members of that party still in government, including in the legislatures in the country's National Assembly, they control everything that is still going on, which means indirectly Mr. Dos Santos is still controlling things in that country. Other former leaders have practically left politics altogether and not trying to do anything to influence the affairs of their country, though some have plans to return to this enticing lifestyle. One of them is former President Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, who served as the 24th President of Liberia from 2006 to 2018 and was the first elected female head of state in Africa. Sirleaf won the Nobel Peace Prize in 2011 in recognition of her efforts to bring women into the peacekeeping process, her being one of them. In keeping with this, she's continuing to do a lot of work in the field, that is encouragement of women participation in the peacekeeping process or peacemaking process, and for this she continues to champion women and economic empowerment, particularly women in leadership and politics. She's also thinking of becoming a fellow at one of the prestigious institutions in the United States. It's not clear whether she has been extended that opportunity, but that's what she wants to do next. After that, she's also saying that she would like to become a farmer, just like Kikwete of Tanzania became a well-known farmer in his country after he served office in that country. Now, former President Thabo Mbeki of South Africa is another example another example of a president who really did not live out of his volition or his own will to leave the presidency, but he was forced out because of issues that relate to in fact, all of these cases of African presidents who have been forced out of office, they fall into two categories. One, they either have stayed way too long, way past the time when they were supposed to have served, or they've been involved in one form of corruption or another. That was the case with Mr. Mbeki, who was the leader of the African National Congress Party in South Africa. But 9 months into, 9 months away from completion of his second term in office, crisis engulfed that party, whereby the members felt, especially the top leadership of the party, felt it was time for Mr. Mbeki to step aside. They forced him to do so, and they did back in 2008. Since then, he basically went into self-imposed political exile in his own country, wasn't doing much politically for a very long time, until in 2018, when he decided to venture back into politics, not to run for president, but he was instrumental in helping the current president, Cyril Ramaphosa from helped him to become president when his turn came to run for president. And that was back in 2019. If he had not supported, meaning if Mr. Mbeki had not supported Mr. Ramaphosa, President Ramaphosa, he would not have been elected as he did. Dr. Mbeki is now Chancellor of the University of South Africa, which is a very prestigious position to hold, not exactly as being president of a country, but next best thing, and that is important because the point is to try to encourage others who are in office to think about their future and what they can do. This is absolutely one good alternative to being president of a country. Now, there are other presidents in the same situation, but because of time, we're going to skip on some of these and go on to talk about maybe a couple more. One of them is, these are examples of what Quattara should be doing to follow their examples. And the other one will be former president of Ghana, President John Kafur, who served as the president of that country from January 2001 to 2009. Having served 2 terms, he was no longer eligible to vie for the presidency, and he retired. Now, Mr. Kafur has done a lot of things since he retired. There won't be enough time to cover them all here. But he has done and continues to do many great things since retirement, most recently being appointed as the first chancellor of the George Grant University of Mines and Technology in Ghana, where he continues to serve. Those in Kenya will remember Mr. Kafur, or those who follow African politics in general will know that Mr. Kafur was one of the eminent personalities who was involved in the resolution of a crisis in that country back in 2008, leading to formation of a coalition government that involved the former president there, Kibaki, and Raila Odinga, who continues to be in the political scene with the current president, Uhuru Kenyatta, something we'll discuss in another show. Former President Kaunda is another example that I'll give to Mr. Quattara, President Quattara to follow, who served, President Kenneth Kaunda, who served as the first president of Zambia from 1964 to 1991. The former president is famous for many things. One of them were his Kaunda suits, which most of people from a certain age will recall. That is, up to now, I think he's still wearing those suits. After ruling forever, internal pressure forced Kaunda to change the rules that kept him in power all those years, and he was succeeded by Frederick Chiluba. Now, the interesting thing about this is that Mr. Chiluba, after he became president, Mr. Kaunda, former President Kaunda, continued to give him a hard time, and that led to Mr. Chiluba, President Chiluba, from seeking to deport Mr. Kaunda from Zambia, claiming that he is not Zambian, he is Malawian. That went through the court system back and forth, back and forth. Ultimately, it was decided that, of course, he is Zambian and had every right to be in the country, so he was not deported, he's still there. After retiring, he has been involved, President Kaunda, former President Kaunda, has been involved in various charitable organizations, his most notable being HIV/AIDS Foundation that he runs because one of his sons succumbed to the disease back in the 80s. He was also the first president in residence of the African Presidential Archives and Research Center at Boston University for some time, and those who watched the show Dancing with the Stars may remember that he appeared at that show one time in 2006 because he's an avid ballroom dancer. So this is the message of all this, the message to African presidents. There is life after the presidency. Please do not cling on to power forever. When your time comes to an end, there's no need to extend it. Just leave so that others can come in and also try to do things which perhaps you didn't get time to do or were not able to for one reason or another, but give them. Let others come in and have a chance to do what needs to be done. That's our show for today. Thank you for watching. Remember, you can watch us online at any time at africtoday.com. You can also watch the show at the various platforms, including Facebook, Twitter, and others by the same name. Thank you for watching, and we hope you have a great week ahead.